Have you ever wondered what might drive a loving father to turn against his only son? What dark secrets lie behind the doors of seemingly perfect families? When Samuel discovers his son's shocking betrayal, he sets in motion a plan that will change both their lives forever. This heart-wrenching tale of family, betrayal, and redemption will keep you on the edge of your seat until the very last page. Don't miss a single moment of this emotional roller coaster. Subscribe to this channel now for more compelling stories that will make you question everything you thought you knew about family bonds.
I used to believe that if I loved my son deeply enough, he would one day learn to be grateful. But I never imagined that the very son I raised with my own hands would secretly take out a hefty life insurance policy on me, then plan to make my death look like an unfortunate accident during a so-called hiking trip. What he didn't know was that I was the one who set the real plan in motion. "Marcus, I just wired $330,000 to your account," I said, my voice as gentle as ever. At 63, my fingers trembled slightly as I held the phone. "Make sure to get some good supplements for Olivia. Take care of her and the baby, okay?" Marcus chuckled immediately, his tone upbeat and effortless, like he'd always been the caring son he pretended to be. "Of course, Dad. I'm going to be a father now. You better believe I'll take good care of Olivia and our little bundle of joy." I was about to say something more, maybe just linger in that moment a little longer, when he cut me off in a rush. "All right, Dad, gotta run. Got some stuff going on over here." Not a hint of gratitude in his voice. Not even a simple thank you. I swallowed the flicker of disappointment, forcing a soft response. "Okay then. Love you, son." But just as I was about to hang up, I heard the one sentence that would echo in my mind for the rest of my life. Finally, the old man sent the money. My heart dropped. It was Olivia's voice. I froze, holding my breath, still clinging to a sliver of hope. Maybe Marcus would say something, anything to defend me, even just a half-hearted word. But I couldn't have been more wrong. Marcus scoffed, the sound sharp and dismissive. He took too damn long. We had to fake a pregnancy just to get that money. My fingers began to tremble, gripping the phone tighter without realizing it. In that instant, every warm memory shattered like brittle glass, leaving nothing but a bitter chill in my chest. Marcus had always been reckless with money. Before he got married, he'd come to me for handouts constantly. Sometimes a few hundred, sometimes thousands, even tens of thousands at a time. And I helped him every time. When he racked up gambling debts, I was the one patching up his messes, one hole after another. But I wasn't naive. I knew what he was like. I always held back a little, kept a safety net just in case. This time, though, I let my guard down completely, because he said Olivia was pregnant. And now I finally saw the truth for what it was. A truth colder than winter, sharper than any knife. After the wedding, Marcus rarely came to see me. The calls grew fewer and farther between. I told myself he was just busy, that married life was demanding. I made up 1,000 excuses for him. But today I realized I had never mattered in his world. Through the phone, Olivia's cheerful voice floated in, chatting with Marcus about how they should spend my money. I stood frozen in the middle of my living room, phone still in my hand, while a hollow silence rang in my ears like the whole world was laughing at me. Only when the line finally disconnected did it hit me. I regretted everything. But the tragedy was that realization came far too late. What I didn't expect was that just 2 days later, Marcus showed up at my doorstep. After living alone for so many years, the sound of someone knocking almost felt unfamiliar. I rubbed my eyes, walked to the door, and opened it to find Marcus standing there with Olivia right beside him. "Marcus?" I offered a warm smile, trying to keep my tone as natural as possible. "What brings you here today?" He grinned like everything was perfectly normal, handing me a bag of something and pushing it into my arms without a second thought. "Had a free day, figured I'd drop by and check on you," he said breezily. "Brought you some supplements too. Thought you could use a little boost to maintain good health." Olivia quickly chimed in, flashing that polished, perfectly rehearsed smile. "Samuel, you have no idea. Marcus talks about you all the time at home. He's just been so swamped with work, he hasn't had the chance to visit." I looked at the pair of them and couldn't help but laugh inwardly. They really were committed to the act, playing their parts to perfection. Well then, if they wanted to perform, I had no problem joining in. Just the thought means so much to me, I said softly, patting Marcus's arm. Come on in. As soon as he stepped into the living room, Marcus gestured for me to sit. Dad, don't just stand there. Let's chat a little. I already had a feeling this visit wasn't just about a friendly check-in. And sure enough, he scratched his head in that deliberately casual way, glanced sideways at Olivia, then said almost offhandedly, So you know Olivia's pregnant. The apartment we're in, it's just way too cramped. We were thinking maybe we could move in with you for a while. I didn't answer right away. I simply looked at them and smiled faintly. Olivia jumped in quickly, letting out a soft sigh, as if the idea pained her. It's really been hard, Samuel. The place is so tight, and now with the baby on the way, it's just not healthy for me or the baby. I knew it. There it was. They'd been eyeing this house for a long time. The single-family home I live in is nestled near the city center. Quiet, safe, with everything nearby. The property value has long passed the $1 million mark. Marcus grew up here. He knows exactly what it's worth. I nodded slightly, my voice calm. Of course you can. Marcus's eyes lit up instantly, though something in his face showed he wasn't fully satisfied yet. He hesitated, then pushed a little further, testing the waters. Well, since we're going to be living here anyway, maybe it makes sense to put the house in my name. That way I can handle the property taxes, the maintenance stuff, take it off your plate. Olivia followed up sweetly, her voice tender, almost condescending. Exactly, Samuel. We're family, right? You've done enough. You should be relaxing now, not worrying about chores and bills. Listening to their little duet, I felt a strange sense of detachment, even amusement. Once upon a time, I would have agonized over every one of Marcus's requests, willingly giving up anything for him. But now, he acted like everything I owned was his by default, like all I needed to hear was, "You're my dad," and I'd roll over and hand him the world. But this time, there wasn't the slightest ripple in my heart. Sure, I said softly. Marcus froze for a moment. Olivia's expression flickered, surprise flashing in her eyes, as if they hadn't expected it to be this easy. I simply pressed my lips together, still smiling as I looked at them. Go on then, keep playing your little show. I'm curious to see just how far you think you can take it. Ever since I agreed to let Marcus and Olivia move in, the atmosphere in the house had shifted subtly but unmistakably. On just their second day here, Olivia couldn't wait to cozy up next to me on the couch, wearing that carefully practiced sugar-sweet smile. Samuel, she said gently, how's the house transfer coming along? I looked up at her and let out a quiet sigh. Still needs a few more days. The process is a bit more complicated than I expected. Her smile stiffened for a moment, just a flicker, but she quickly recovered with a breezy laugh. That's fine. We're in no rush. We'll wait. Of course they'd wait. They had no choice. Until that paperwork was finalized, the house still legally belonged to me. From that day on, their entire demeanor shifted into something disturbingly wholesome. Olivia started waking up early to make breakfast for me. Marcus, who hadn't lifted a finger in years, suddenly offered to clean the kitchen. Every word, every gesture was soaked in sweetness. The perfect portrait of a doting daughter-in-law and a considerate son. But I knew better. It was all a performance. They were just biding their time, waiting for the right moment. Marcus had never been the type to serve anyone. As a boy, he treated me like a maid, expecting meals and favors as if they were his birthright. As a grown man, he barely bothered with a phone call, let alone any sign of affection. And now suddenly, he was wiping down my dining table? What a joke. I'd poured my life into raising him, sacrificed everything for his future. After his mother walked out when he was only 4, declaring she wasn't cut out for motherhood, I became both father and mother. I juggled my engineering job with school runs, packed lunches, and bedtime stories. When the other kids had their mothers at school plays, I made sure to be in the front row, even if it meant using sick days I couldn't afford to lose. And in return, he saw me as nothing more than a gold mine to be drained. That night I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, haunted by a question that wouldn't let go. Was I being too cold? Too heartless? But if I were truly cold, would I have forgiven him so many times? Would I have bent over backward, giving him chance after chance? I kept hoping he'd change, kept believing that somehow my sincere fatherly love could cure anything. And just as I was questioning whether I'd become too distant, I heard whispers coming from the living room. I'm not the kind of person who eavesdrops, but in that moment something compelled me to move softly, slowly toward the door. I pressed my ear to the wood, and what I heard became a memory I would never be able to erase. As soon as he signs over the house, Marcus said, his voice low and cold, we kick him out. I froze. Olivia giggled, barely containing her excitement. Exactly, and by then, all his inheritance should be ours anyway. My father, Marcus scoffed, the sound sharp and dismissive. He doesn't mean a damn thing to me. He's just dead weight. I've got you now. What do I need him for? A chill shot straight through my spine. This was the child I loved with everything I had. I held our home together. I raised him, watched him grow. I bailed him out of every mess, every debt. And now, in his eyes, I was nothing more than a burden. Where did I go so wrong? What did I do to raise such an ungrateful, heartless man? Maybe I loved him too much. Maybe I gave too freely, believing that love was about selfless sacrifice. And maybe that sacrifice taught him he was entitled to everything. My mind drifted to a memory I hadn't visited in years. Marcus was still in college the first time he got tangled up in gambling. He racked up tens of thousands in debt before I even knew what was happening. When the loan sharks came knocking, I realized just how deep he'd sunk. He knelt at my feet sobbing, begging me to save him, swearing he'd never gamble again. And I believed him, far too easily. I cut him off from his bank accounts, locked him in the house, hoping he'd finally see the damage he was doing. But instead, he raged. He smashed things, kicked doors, screamed threats. If you keep this up, I'll kill myself, he yelled. Still, I couldn't bring myself to give up on him. I wanted so badly to believe there was hope. Until one day I brought him a bowl of hot soup. He snatched it and threw it in my face. The scalding liquid burned my arm red and raw. He stood over me, seething. How long are you planning to torture me? I remember kneeling there silently, cleaning up the shattered bowl and spilled soup while my skin blistered, saying nothing. Was it wrong to bail him out? To give him another chance? Or was my real mistake believing that someone so emotionally hollow could ever learn to love? Now, on the surface, his life looked more put together than ever, but he had only grown colder, more calculating, more greedy. In his eyes, I no longer had any worth. That night, I finally cried myself to sleep. What I didn't know was something even more vicious was already waiting just around the corner. The morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting soft stripes across my bedroom as I slowly opened my eyes. Out of habit, I turned toward the side of the bed. Tucker's rug beside the bed was empty. No sign of the old companion who'd curled up at my feet every morning for 12 years, nudging me awake with his damp little nose. A tight knot formed in my chest. I sat up, threw off the blanket, and instinctively glanced toward the bedroom door. By now, Tucker should have been there waiting, tail wagging, ready for our usual morning walk in the backyard. But today, he wasn't. Tucker, come here, boy. I clapped my hands and walked to the doorway, scanning the living room. I checked near the couch under the dining table by the stairs. Nothing. I headed to the kitchen. His water bowl by the fridge was still full, which meant he'd been home last night, but his food dish was empty. A wave of unease started to rise in my chest. Tucker, I called again, my voice louder now, Walking toward the back door, I stepped into the yard. The freshly mowed grass glistened with dew, the morning air rich with the scent of earth, but I couldn't enjoy any of it. "Tucker, come on, this isn't funny." My voice echoed across the stillness, but only the chirping of birds answered me. My fingertips grew cold. That gnawing anxiety now settled into something darker. Dread. I rushed back inside and searched every room. I looked behind the sofa, under the bed, in closets, behind bathroom doors. Still nothing. Finally, I walked over to his dog bed. That little corner, once cluttered with old blankets, toys, and his favorite squeaky ball, was now pristine, as if no dog had ever lived there. That's when it hit me. He hadn't wandered off. He'd been taken. A chill shot up my spine like a knife tracing the length of my back. I turned and walked into the living room. Marcus and Olivia were sitting at the dining table eating breakfast without a care in the world. Olivia was dragging her manicured nails against the plate, making an irritating scraping sound. I paused, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Marcus, have either of you seen Tucker?" Marcus didn't even look up. He bit into a strip of bacon and waved his hand casually. "Oh, the dog? I took him out this morning and dumped him somewhere." A deafening roar exploded in my mind, like my whole body had been hollowed out in a single blow. "You've what?" My voice came out in broken gasps, my nails digging into my palms as I struggled to keep control. Marcus finally glanced up, chewing his food with lazy indifference. "It's just an old dog always getting in the way. Figured the house would be a lot quieter without him." My ears rang. My stomach churned like I'd been punched in the gut. "You have no idea what he meant to me," I said, voice shaking, my fingertips pale and trembling. He shrugged, completely unfazed. "Come on, Dad, don't make such a big deal out of it. You're 63 years old. What are you doing keeping a dog around anyway? You've wasted 12 years and God knows how much money on that mutt. I did you a favor. Now you don't have to deal with it anymore." I stared at him, lips quivering, speechless. Olivia set down her fork, dabbed at her mouth with a napkin, and said casually, "Honestly, Samuel, you should be thanking Marcus. He made the right decision for you." I didn't reply. I just stood there, frozen. My eyes drifted to the coffee table. An old faded photo sat there. In it, I was sitting on the couch holding a 1-year-old Tucker in my arms, smiling with a warmth I could still remember vividly. That dog had been my comfort, my companion, my only constant in the years after retirement, when the silence in the house became too heavy to bear, and now they had taken him from me without a flicker of remorse. The morning sun poured through the windows, but I had never felt so cold. It was as if my heart had finally caved in, collapsing into a void so dark and deep I couldn't even find the bottom. Marcus had hurt me before. I'd swallowed the pain. I'd accepted that I'd raised an ungrateful, selfish man. But I never thought the final blow, the one that would finally break me, would come from a dog. In that moment, I understood something with painful clarity. It was time to cut this farce of a father-son bond once and for all. By the time I walked away from the dining table, Marcus and Olivia still showed no signs of remorse. If anything, they seemed to believe their behavior was perfectly justified. I spent the entire afternoon sitting quietly in my room, my heart slowly returning to a state of eerie calm. "Tucker," I whispered to the empty room, "if you were still here, I'd want you to see this. See how they'll pay for their cruelty." For 2 days, I barely spoke to either of them. They didn't seem to notice or care. Their performance had dropped all pretense now that they believed I was fully under their control. Olivia no longer bothered with breakfast. Marcus spent his days lounging on my couch, feet up on my coffee table. On the 3rd day, while tidying the living room, I happened to glance at Marcus's laptop, left open on the couch. He must have forgotten to close it, its screen still glowing, paused on a browser window. I hadn't intended to snoop, but the words on the screen stopped me cold. How to take out a high-value life insurance policy for an elderly family member. Common methods of accidents that go undetected. How to reassign a trust fund beneficiary after death. I only read a few lines before a chill spread down my spine, settling like ice along my back. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty my life had been reduced to a dollar amount, a target with a payout. Maybe it was fate, maybe it was dumb luck, but that one accidental glance might have just saved my life. Without hesitation, I grabbed my coat and drove straight to the insurance office. Sitting at the reception desk, I tried to keep my voice steady. "Hi, I'd like to check if anyone has taken out a policy under my name." The employee typed for a few moments, then pulled up a file. "Yes, Mr. Wilson, there is indeed a high-value life insurance policy registered under your name. Premium tier, actually. One of the most expensive plans we offer." I took the document with trembling fingers. My hands felt like ice. I didn't need more proof. I knew exactly what Marcus and Olivia were planning. To them, I wasn't family. I was a payout waiting to be collected. When I returned home, they were lounging on the couch, waiting for me like nothing had happened. Marcus, surprisingly, stood to greet me. He even reached for my bag with that familiar phony warmth. "Hey, Dad. You must be exhausted from running around today." He always pulled out the dutiful son act when he needed something. I kept my expression unreadable as I sat down. "What's all this about?" Marcus scratched his head, trying to appear casual. "We were thinking maybe we could take you out to the National Forest tomorrow. Hike some trails, get some fresh air, change of scenery." Olivia chimed in immediately, placing a gentle hand on my back, her voice dripping with contrition. "I've been so moody lately, snapping at you for no reason. I'm really sorry, Samuel. I thought it might be nice to reset, spend some peaceful time together." I nearly laughed out loud at the performance. If I hadn't already uncovered their plan, I might have actually believed this little charade of affection. But I smiled and nodded. "Sure, sounds nice, I'll go." They both looked momentarily stunned by how easily I agreed. Olivia was the first to recover, quickly smiling and ushering me toward my bedroom. "Great, then you better go start packing. We're leaving early." I didn't respond. I just went to my room and locked the door behind me, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the empty backpack. My hands curled slowly into fists. I already knew what they intended to do. But what they didn't know was that I had started planning long before they ever did. It wasn't just them waiting for tomorrow. So was I. But the ending wouldn't be what they imagined. That night, I couldn't sleep. Images of Tucker kept flashing through my mind, followed by the memory of Marcus's laptop screen. Those cold, calculated searches about insurance payouts and undetected accidents. It all made perfect sense now, the hiking trip, the sudden desire to spend time together. They weren't planning a reconciliation. They were planning my demise. After breakfast, we set off. I sat quietly in the passenger seat of Marcus's car, watching the scenery grow increasingly barren as we left the city behind. The farther we drove, the quieter my heart became, calm in a way that felt almost ominous. They had chosen a remote state park on the outskirts of town. I'd heard of it before. Every year there were reports of hikers who mysteriously disappeared or accidentally fell from the cliffs. Treacherous terrain, unmonitored trails. The place had earned a reputation among locals, not a good one. Marcus knew exactly what kind of place this was. That's precisely why he chose it, and I knew it too. "We're here," he said, pulling up near the base of the mountain. As I stepped out, a sharp chill crept up my spine despite the daylight. Olivia immediately looped her arm through mine, her voice overly cheerful. "Samuel, what are you spacing out for? Come on, don't kill the mood." I offered a warm smile in return. "Of course. We're here to relax today, aren't we?" We began hiking up the steep trail, winding higher and higher until the sun had turned the sky a glowing shade of crimson. When we finally stopped to rest near a scenic overlook, we were just a few steps from the summit. Marcus gestured toward a large rock. "Dad, sit down, take a breather." He reached into his backpack and pulled out a drink, handing it to me. "It's an electrolyte drink. Thought it might help you recharge." I took the bottle with a grateful nod and raised it to my lips, just enough to make it look like I was drinking. I never swallowed a drop. As I lowered the bottle, I caught a fleeting glance exchanged between Marcus and Olivia, that smug curl at the corners of their mouths confirming what I already knew. Perfect. I pulled 2 energy bars from my bag and held them out. You two should eat something too. It's been a long climb. They took the bars eagerly, tearing into the wrappers without a second thought. So eager, in fact, they didn't even notice the faint tear marks I'd carefully concealed on the packaging. I sat calmly on the rock, pretending to rest. Then I let my body go limp and collapsed to the ground. Right on cue, I heard Olivia's delighted laugh. She actually drank it. That was way too easy. Marcus's voice followed, colder than I'd ever heard it. Sorry, Dad, but I really need that insurance money. I felt them start to drag me toward the edge, likely aiming for a spot off the trail where no one would find a body easily. I counted silently in my head. Then, a sudden noise. 2 heavy crashes hit the ground behind me. I opened my eyes and stood up slowly, brushing the dirt off my clothes. They lay unconscious on the ground. You see, I never drank that electrolyte concoction. I'd only pretended to. The real trick was in the energy bars, laced with the very sedatives they had hidden in the house. Over the past few days, I'd quietly found their stash, slipped a little out, and today I simply returned it. Trying to trap me. You're far too naive. I shot them one last glance, cold and cutting, then slung my backpack over my shoulder and began walking back down the mountain. As night fell, the temperature would drop sharply. Wild animals often wandered these trails. If they didn't find their way back down before dark, well, that would be their lesson to learn. Let them have a taste of real survival for once. I hummed to myself as I descended step by step. Just as I neared the trailhead, I suddenly heard faint cries nearby, weak, broken sounds calling for help. I stopped in my tracks, turned toward the sound, and carefully made my way through the brush. There in the undergrowth lay a man, his leg clearly injured, face pale, eyes glassy from pain. He looked to be around my age, his voice trembled. Can you call for help? I didn't hesitate. I dialed emergency services and stayed by his side until an ambulance arrived. At the hospital, I sat quietly in the waiting room as they wheeled him into the ER. A while later, a doctor came out. He's going to be okay. Out of danger. When he finally regained consciousness, I heard his name clearly for the first time. Thank you, he said softly. I'm Richard Grant, Executive Director of Grant Group. My heart skipped a beat. The Grant Group, the very firm Marcus's company had been desperately trying to secure investment from. How interesting. Fate never forgets its timing. Samuel Wilson, I replied with a simple smile. I was just doing what anyone would do. You saved my life, Samuel. His voice was still weak, but his grip on my hand was surprisingly strong. If there's ever anything you need, anything at all, just ask. Whatever I can do, I will. I smiled gently and patted the back of his hand. I just happened to be there. Doing the right thing doesn't always need a reward. He spoke with such sincerity, but I preferred to keep this unexpected encounter to myself, a quiet twist of fate I'd rather treasure privately. As I rose to leave, I saw the hallway outside his room was already crowded. Executives, assistants, friends, all rushing in to check on him. Even lying in that hospital bed, Richard carried the calm authority of a man used to commanding a room. He wasn't just another patient. He was someone important, and for the first time in a long while I felt something in my chest loosen, a weight lifted. I didn't know whether Marcus and Olivia had safely returned from the mountain, but strangely, I wasn't in any rush to find out. Marcus had probably never imagined, not even for a second, that his frail old father was actually a longtime member of a local mountaineering club, trained in wilderness first aid, and in better physical shape than most people half his age. That night, I slept like a baby. When I woke the next morning, sunlight spilling softly across my pillow, the clock read 10 o'clock. I picked up the phone, dialing with shaky, breathless urgency. Hello? Please, you have to help me. My son and daughter-in-law went hiking at Sable Ridge yesterday. They haven't come back. I'm so worried. Please, please find them. The operator's voice grew serious at once. Sir, stay calm. We're dispatching a search team immediately. 5 hours later, I got the call. We found them. I took my time getting to the hospital. When I opened the door to their room, I found Marcus and Olivia lying in their beds, pale and haggard like a pair of soaked stray cats. Marcus turned his head weakly. Dad, where did you go? I blinked innocently, keeping my voice soft. I'm not sure. I just remember waking up in a hospital room. I rolled up my pant leg to reveal a neatly wrapped ankle bandage. Doctor said it was just a mild sprain. Olivia gasped, her breath still ragged. We passed out all of a sudden. It doesn't make sense. Did you? I quickly waved my hand, cutting her off with a look of hurt surprise. What are you saying? Why would I ever do something like that? I love you both. I've been sick with worry. Marcus frowned, as if trying to piece things together, but said nothing. Forget it, he mumbled finally, flopping back against the pillow in defeat. 2 days after the incident, I was surprised by a phone call from Richard Grant. His voice was warm, filled with a sincerity I'd almost forgotten existed. Samuel, he said, I was hoping we might have dinner sometime this week. I'd like to thank you properly for what you did. That's really not necessary, I replied. It's not just about saying thank you. There was a pause then. I really would like to see you again. Something in his tone made me smile. A genuine smile, one I hadn't felt in months. I'd like that too. We arranged to meet at a quiet restaurant downtown. Richard was already seated when I arrived, rising to greet me with a firm handshake that lingered just a moment longer than necessary. You're looking well, he said, gesturing for me to sit. Better than the last time you saw me, I chuckled. Though I can't say the same for you. Your leg will heal, he finished with a dismissive wave. The doctor says I'll walk without a limp in a month or two. Over dinner, conversation flowed effortlessly. Richard spoke about his business, his passion for environmental philanthropy, his love of classical music. I found myself opening up about my years as an engineer, about raising Marcus alone after his mother left, about Tucker. The words spilled out naturally, without the bitter edge they normally carried. It sounds like you've had your share of hardships, Richard said softly. I shrugged. Everyone has their burdens to bear. He leaned forward slightly. Yes, but not everyone bears them with such grace. At the end of the evening, Richard insisted on driving me home. As we pulled up in front of my house, he turned to me with unexpected seriousness. Samuel, I don't believe in coincidences. Meeting you on that mountain, I think it happened for a reason. I smiled, feeling a warmth I hadn't experienced in years. Perhaps it did. As I watched his car pull away, I realized something had shifted inside me. For the first time since discovering Marcus's betrayal, I felt a flicker of hope. Not for reconciliation with my son, but for something entirely new. During their hospital stay, Olivia didn't miss a beat in returning to her usual self. I'm craving Boston lobster today. Tomorrow I want abalone soup. I need to nourish my body. Once I would have gently reminded her to eat light, but not now. I simply smiled, nodded, and went to the kitchen. I prepared everything just the way she liked and added a rich, creamy soup every day, never missing a serving. She drank it down with satisfaction, and I watched quietly, content. Meanwhile, Richard and I continued to meet. Sometimes for lunch, sometimes for dinner. Once or twice, we even went to concerts together. There was an easiness to our relationship I'd never experienced before, a mutual respect and admiration that required no performance. He listened when I spoke, really listened, and valued my opinions. It was refreshing, almost disorienting, after years of Marcus's dismissive attitude. One evening over coffee, Richard casually mentioned that he'd been looking at investments in Marcus's company. The management structure seems problematic, he said carefully. I nodded, saying nothing. letting the silence hang between us. Given recent events, Richard continued, his eyes never leaving mine, I might have to reconsider my position. I sipped my coffee, hiding my smile behind the cup. You have to do what's best for your business. He nodded just once, understanding perfectly. No further words were needed. On the day Marcus and Olivia were discharged, I knew this charade had reached its final act. Marcus returned to his company, beaming with hope, only to be stopped at the entrance by security. I work here. Why can't I get in? He demanded. The guard didn't flinch. System says you've been removed. Marcus froze. He frantically messaged the company's executives, only to receive a curt reply. Your position has been terminated. The company no longer requires your services. It hit him like a brick to the chest. He came home in a daze and collapsed onto the sofa, his eyes hollow. I looked over casually. Rough day? You seem upset? His lips tightened, his fists clenched. Then he snapped, unable to hold it in anymore. Am I really that worthless? Why would they fire me? I walked over and gently patted his head. Don't be so discouraged. I have money. I'll take care of you both. You shouldn't stress over work anymore. In fact, why don't I send you two on a vacation? Clear your heads a little. What do you say? He looked up, startled by the offer, a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. But then he nodded. Yeah, maybe that wouldn't be so bad. Of course he said yes. I knew him too well. He never turned down anything that smelled like an easy benefit. Olivia chimed in eagerly. A vacation sounds perfect. We deserve a break. And just like that, I booked them a 7-day trip to Thailand. They had no idea this was my final gift to them, one last act of quiet, calculated kindness. As for me, I was already turning the page to a new chapter. Richard's business card sat quietly in my drawer, waiting. He'd called a few days after our dinner, asking to see me again. I still owe you dinner, he'd said warmly. Not just to say thank you, I really do want to see you again. I ran my fingers over the raised lettering on that card, feeling a softness in my heart I hadn't felt in years. Maybe, just maybe, my real life was only just beginning. The very first thing Marcus did after landing in Thailand was message me asking for travel money. I transferred the funds without hesitation, even adding with a smile, "If it's not enough, just let me know." That one sentence completely unchained their spending. From a few thousand to tens of thousands, from fancy restaurants to luxury boutiques, they indulged without restraint. And each time, I sent the money generously. Meanwhile, back home, I began clearing them out, piece by piece. I hired a moving company, packed up every last item they owned, clothes, junk, anything with their scent, and sent it all to the community donation center. Anything remotely valuable I donated to charity. I left nothing behind. Then I changed the locks. By the time they returned from their so-called luxury vacation, my cleanup was already complete, every step executed flawlessly. As soon as they got off the plane, I sent them the final blow, a detailed invoice of everything they had spent during their trip. Every item, every dollar, clearly marked. Borrower, Marcus Wilson, because none of that money came from my personal accounts. I had simply advanced it all through Marcus's own credit line, pushed past the limit just as he liked to do with everything in life. I had merely followed his example and let his name do the paying. They thought my money was theirs to take, but there's no such thing as a free lunch. Marcus's call came quickly, his voice laced with panic and fury. What the hell is this? What are these bills you sent me? My voice was calm. The money you spent, Marcus. It's yours to repay. He paused, stunned, before erupting. I'm your son. Isn't it normal for me to spend your money? I let out a soft chuckle. Really? You still remember I'm your father? Tell me, aside from when you needed money, have you ever looked me in the eyes and said, I love you, Dad? I hung up. An hour later, the doorbell began ringing wildly, then pounding. Marcus's fist slammed against the door. Dad, Open up, you hear me? Olivia's voice followed, shrill and furious. Is this your way of cutting ties with your own son? What kind of father does this? I walked slowly to the door and opened it just enough to block the entrance with my body. Marcus immediately tried to force his way in, but I stood firm. Excuse me, what do you think you're doing? This isn't your house. His eyes blazed. What do you mean? You gave us this house. Olivia sneered, arms crossed. Don't act high and mighty. We let you stay here out of kindness. I let out a cold laugh and tossed a folder straight into Marcus's face. Take a look. Whose name is on the deed? Marcus opened the folder. His face went pale as he read. This can't be. Vanessa snatched it from his hands, flipping through the pages until her fingers trembled. It still says your name. You tricked us. I raised an eyebrow. You were in such a rush to collect your inheritance you didn't even read the fine print. That document you signed, just a non-binding property transfer intent form, not legally valid. Her face turned ashen. Why? Why would you give us a fake contract? I smiled faintly. Because you were too busy celebrating to notice the last line. For display purposes only, not a legally binding transfer of ownership. Marcus lost control, shoving me hard. I'm your son. How could you do this to me? I steadied myself, then calmly reached into a drawer and pulled out another envelope. You're not my son. He froze, the color draining from his face completely. I handed him the envelope. This is a paternity test report. Your biological mother was the woman who broke up my marriage. She had you, then vanished. Your pathetic father was kicked out of my life for it. Marcus stared at me, his eyes widening in disbelief. But I continued, my voice steady. I took you in. I raised you. I gave you a home, a name, an education. I paid your debts, bought you a house, gave you a family. I never had another child because I gave everything to you. And what did you give me in return? Marcus sank to the floor like his spine had snapped, muttering under his breath. No. No. You're lying. This can't be real. I crouched down, looked him in the eyes, and said quietly, I've already done more than enough for you. Now pay back what you owe and get out of my house. Then I turned to Olivia. Oh, and about that little drink on the mountain? I never touched it. You two were the ones who took your own medicine. I just returned it to its rightful owners. With that, I slammed the door shut behind me. Outside, Marcus's sobs broke through the silence, deep, broken, the sound of someone who had finally woken up, but far too late. And I stood on the threshold of my own life at last and didn't look back. The sun rose differently that morning. Its rays seemed clearer, brighter, stretching across my bedroom floor not as an intrusion, but as a gentle reminder that a new day had begun. A day that truly belonged to me. I sat on the edge of my bed, my old bones not quite as creaky as they used to be, and looked around at the room I'd transformed. Gone were the faded curtains Marcus's mother had chosen decades ago. Gone was the worn carpet I'd kept out of some misplaced sentimentality. In their place were colors and textures I loved, deep blues, rich browns, and the soft comfort of things chosen solely for my own pleasure. The doorbell rang precisely at 9. Richard, punctual as always. When I opened the door, he stood there with a small package in his hands and that thoughtful smile that had become so wonderfully familiar. Ready for our walk? He asked. I nodded, taking the package. Inside was a leather collar and leash. The shelter called, Richard said. That retriever we looked at last week. He's ready to go home. My heart fluttered. After Tucker, I'd sworn I wouldn't get another dog. The pain had been too great. But Richard had gently suggested that perhaps the best honor to Tucker's memory wasn't absence, but presence. A new companion to love. One who needed a home, just as much as I needed the warmth of paws padding across my floor again. As we drove to the shelter, Richard's hand occasionally covered mine, a gesture that still surprised me with its easy tenderness. There was nothing demanding in his touch, no expectation of return, just the simple pleasure of connection. "Have you heard from them?" he asked quietly. I shook my head. "Not since they came to the door 3 weeks ago. Marcus's card was declined at a restaurant downtown last night. Someone I know saw him working as a valet." Richard nodded, his eyes on the road. "And how do you feel about that?" It was a fair question, one I'd asked myself often in the quiet hours before dawn. "I feel free," I said finally, not happy about his suffering, but free from the responsibility of preventing it. The shelter was busy that morning. Families with children, couples, single people, all looking for that special connection. The retriever, a gentle 5-year-old named Max, recognized me immediately, his tail wagging with almost desperate hope. As the attendant handed me his papers, she smiled. He was abandoned by his previous family when they moved, left tied to a fence. Took him weeks to trust anyone again. I knelt down, my knees protesting slightly, and let Max sniff my hand. "I know something about that," I said softly. "Don't worry, boy. We're going to be just fine." That evening, with Max curled contentedly by the fireplace, Richard and I sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and gold. His shoulder pressed against mine, solid and real. "All those years," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I thought love meant sacrifice. I thought it meant emptying yourself out until there was nothing left." Richard's hand found mine, his fingers intertwining with my own. "And now?" I smiled, watching the last sliver of sun disappear below the horizon. "Now I know that real love fills you up. It doesn't drain you. It makes you more yourself, not less." "Samuel," Richard said, his voice gentle but serious, "I want you to know something. No matter what happens between us, whether this becomes something more or simply remains a friendship, you deserve to be cherished. Not for what you give or what you do, just for who you are." The words settled over me like a warm blanket, comfort and protection against a lifetime of conditional affection. At 63, I was finally learning what it meant to be valued simply for existing. Inside, Max gave a contented sigh in his sleep. Above us, the first stars appeared, pinpricks of light in the deepening blue. I leaned my head against Richard's shoulder and closed my eyes, breathing in the scent of his cologne, mixed with the jasmine blooming along the porch railing. "I think," I said slowly, "this is what coming home feels like." And in that moment, with the night settling gently around us, I knew with absolute certainty that the inheritance I'd spent my life trying to give was nothing compared to the legacy I was finally claiming for myself, the simple, profound right to joy.
Dear friend, family isn't always defined by blood, but by love and respect. If this story touched you, remember that it's never too late to reclaim your worth and find genuine connections. Life offers second chances when we're brave enough to take them. Our elders deserve dignity, not exploitation. They've given us roots so we can grow wings. Did Samuel's journey resonate with you? Show your support by liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more powerful stories that inspire change. Your engagement helps us continue sharing these important narratives. Thank you for being part of our community.